switch from 60 feet down to 24 feet to approve this regular plan.
I never said 60 feet, so I don't know where you have heard that information.
Okay.
Do you remember?
It was at a work session. I mean, obviously people get signed up and verify everything. Okay.
Anybody else?
Good evening.
Hi.
Are you going to review the applications for the rate or anything?
Yes,
You're going to go over?
yes.
Okay. The December 3rd, he went in for a variance. He was talking about setbacks. And setbacks. That was for the variance. Now he goes in and puts an application for this ordinance. And he gets more specific on it. Talks about the size of a townhouse, if our district recommendations are in play. On number 6, is it 1? He said that, I don't know where he's getting his measurements from, but he's saying if he doesn't follow our rules, it'll be a 20,000 foot building requirement for one house. And it would mean the interior of the house would have to be 20 feet wide, and then the lot would be 1,000 foot deep. It also requires a 40-foot front setback, 15-foot side. Then he comes up and he says it will be impossible for the interior of the townhouse unit to have 15 feet side back. He's a lawyer, he knows what he's talking, that's irrelevant there. The 15-foot side yard is off the total structure, that's going to be 6 townhouses. Then you got 15 feet, you know, that's the way I look at it, and I think I had a thought in
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not actually what the ordinance says. The ordinance just says 15.
Yeah, it's just not clear.
Yeah, for a townhouse, the whole structure is going to be 6 units.
Right.
Understood. It's just not clear.
Yeah.
That's the point.
It currently isn't clear.
Yeah. But then the 40-foot setback, then everything's an imposition or minimum size lots, all that stuff. But I have a question on the sidewalk and the driveway. But I don't know if you're going to get into that today, but this was on chapter 243 residential driveway details. It's not under the southern land development and then code 360. Now when I look at this and I read that code, he has to bring a driveway line, go over the sidewalk and then put a curb. So is that sidewalk to the curb, does he figure that into his driveway distance, right?
No. The way that works is the road right of way, because these will be offered as public roads, will be 50 feet wide. That means 25 feet from center line of road to back of road right of way. That's where his property line would start. That's where the setback would start. So that's essentially 12 and a half feet from back of curb. Sidewalk sits inside that space. Once you hit that line, that's beginning of the, whatever the setback is from there back to the.
But you're going to go over everything. And another thing, I think the township's been reasonable for its accommodations to allow him to build 94 units, no problem. So we have to take that into consideration. That's a reasonable accommodation from the township. So anyway, I'll let you guys talk about that.
Okay, thank you.
We'll be open for questions before.
Well, we're hoping to have questions now, so we could review it.
But everything, if you read our ordinances, I think they're easy to follow, they're not ambiguous, and somebody can presume they are, but I don't think so. And, but for him to be more detailed on his request at Cure, where his first application was just on a couple items. So I don't know if it should go that way. He should be more detailed on his first application for the variance. That's the way I look at it. And we have minutes of the zoning hearing board when they went down to meet. Okay, I can get them up there.
Yes,
All right.
they're online.
No, they're not.
They might not be online. No, they're not.
There's nothing online for them.
I think the zoning hearing board, would they had a very narrow scope of what they were reviewing. They requested a 20-foot setback rather than a 40-foot setback at the zoning hearing board.
Yeah, the last meeting we had, the lawyer brought up something about the comprehensive plan. But everything in the comprehensive plan has the same information that's on ordinance. The setback, side yards, and front yards. So, okay.
Anybody else?
Sylvia? Yes. Pat Sterling wrote something out that she couldn't be here, she wanted me to read, but I don't know whether you want me to do that or not.
You can do that.
Since the zoning hearing board has denied the request, I am not sure why we're debating the issue. Every businessman takes a risk when he purchases land or purchases anything he hopes to sell for a profit. It's not our responsibility to concern ourselves with Mr. Regan's financial success. It's the responsibility of the supervisors and planning commission to support the township zoning hearing board who looked at the proposal and made a common sense decision that Mr. Regan's plan for 124 townhomes did not comply with the restrictions set up in the zoning code. The answer is simple. We require builders to meet the standards set up in our zoning laws put in place to protect our citizens. Respectfully, Mr. Regan's balance sheet should not be part of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to reiterate again, it's just the zoning hearing board did not determine that they couldn't have 124 units. But the zoning hearing board was determined they could not have 20-foot setback rather than 40-foot setback, just to make it clear.
That's my question though. If they requested that on the first application, and then they went into the second application with more details, is that acceptable?
For the zoning hearing board?
No, regular. What he presented to the zoning hearing.
I think she's asking, I mean, for the curative amendment.
For the curative amendment or for the zoning hearing board?
I think what he might be asking, if I understood what he was saying up there, is he applying for a cure that we haven't, there's a deficiency for it?
First one
I'm not
was
sure.
variance.
For 40.
They wanted a variance from the zoning hearing board for 20 feet instead of 40 feet. That's all they asked for.
Correct.
Where did 94 homes come in? I
That was
was,
the,
The 94 is what, I'm sorry, it's
That was the December
96, is what they stated multiple times, they even had on a drawing.
who's
that,
that?
The attorneys, the engineer, regulate all
For
of them.
regular. Okay.
That if they did not get the variance for the 20-foot setback, they could only build the 96 units, and they even had a drawing set up there because they could not do it financially. It was not financially feasible for them to do that small quantity.
Okay, so it wasn't the zoning hearing board.
No, they denied the variance,
That was it.
and that's what they were saying.
the first one was variance.
I guess I was confused on what you meant, but.
Yeah, they asked for variance, and they only gave a couple items they weren't sure. But on the second for the curative application, they went into more detail. Why weren't they, yeah, they changed the information.
Setbacks,
So why wouldn't it be
They
the,
changed it from 20 feet to 25 feet.
24.
This-
well, everything they read, I just read there, is, because they didn't talk about the side yards and. I'm sure that's the first one.
And the application that they sent says 25.
You said the variance
24,
to this ordinance that to reduce the setback from 50 feet to 20.
That's the first one.
That's the first
Yeah.
one.
And then they changed that, it's, the ordinance actually says 40 feet, not 50 feet for town.
But he didn't list anything on Exhibit C. And like I said, not that we're bending it backward, we're not saying you can't build it. So that's a reasonable expectation.
Okay, so we do have the application. Sorry, so, our engineer, well, that's the first, so Butler County Board of Commissioners actually reviewed the plan. Their recommendation was that we hire an outside entity to look at the Curative Amendment, which the Board of Supervisors did approve at their last meeting. I don't know if she has seen it yet, I'm not involved in that process. So that person will be reviewing it for the Board of Supervisors. I believe prior to the hearing, which is scheduled for May 12th, right? So the hearing is scheduled for May 12th. Public, of course, is welcome. There will be a court reporter there. Everybody will be able to review it at that time. The applicant will be there as well when doing another presentation. So that was their main. The only other thing that they said that I can see is maybe to do two definitions for duplex and townhouse, which I think we have in our ordinance. And maybe they didn't look at our ordinance to look at that. So that was their recommendations. Our engineer also reviewed the plan and gave his comments. There are, I believe, 6. Yes, 6 criteria that the Board of Supervisors need to consider when they're looking at the application for Curative Amendment. I believe, Tom, that they went through all of these at the last meeting.
Correct. They did satisfy those requirements as far as what they need to do to comply with the Curative Amendment procedure.
And I think we went through these at the last meeting. Do you want me to read these?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
You're gonna take me some water, Steve. So the impact of the proposal on roads, sewer facilities, water supplies, schools, and other public service facilities. That's A. B, if the proposal is for a residential use, the impact of the proposal upon regional housing needs and the effectiveness of the proposal in providing housing units of a type actually available to and affordable by classes of persons otherwise unlawfully excluded by the challenged provisions of the ordinance or map. C is the suitability of the site for the intensity of use proposed by the site's soils, slopes, woodlands, wetlands, floodplains, aquifers, and natural resources and other natural features. And just so you all know, this is all in our ordinance as well. Okay, D. The impact of the proposed use on the site's soils, slopes, woodlands, wetlands, floodplains, natural resources, and natural features. The degree to which these are protected or destroyed, the tolerance of the resources to development, and any adverse environmental impacts. And E, the impact of the proposal on the preservation of agriculture and other land uses which are essential to public health and welfare.
Can I ask a question? Sorry to interrupt. Actually, this, you're reading from, I guess, section 300. I don't know what these are because it looks like you have 2 sets of ordinances.
Those are the factors from the ordinance reproduces the factors from the NPC, the Municipalities Planning Code, 10609.1C. Those are the standards that apply to any Curative Amendment.
No, I'm sorry. This is kind of a side question. It looks like the township has 2 sets of ordinances. We have an ordinance 89, and then we have this legislation, which you just read, well, you were reading from, I don't know if it's section 300 chapter 59 or?
300 is zoning code, right?
Okay, so, but there's also an ordinance 89. And I saw in 2017, there was a ordinance that we were now converting from our old ordinances to this.
It's E-code.
The E-code, right. So this, I'm getting this, all I'm trying to do is prevent further confusion. So sometimes it says ordinance 89, sometimes it's E-code. Do we,
It's always passed as the number of ordinance passed per year, calendar year.
okay,
Then they're not encoded immediately. So
Okay.
the ordinance will be the law, and then it'll be put in the amendments to the code
okay.
in this section number.
So if I just want to identify what she read, I have 300-59, how would I refer to that?
That's the latest ordinance. That's the codified ordinance of ordinance 89 that's incorporated in that.
Okay,
That's the most official document the township has.
I don't disagree, and that's why I just want to know if I refer to it, how do I refer, if I said Sylvia's reading, I want to tell everybody in the audience, Sylvia's is reading from what?
What section number are you in?
300-59? What?
What section number are you in right there?
300, I think. It's from so if you look at the
No,
E-code,
that's from the zoning code. What's the number?
300-59.
59, okay.
So if you go to E-code, there's two sections. There's like legislation in general. And I'm sorry if I pulled your meeting out. I'm having trouble referring to, how do I refer to it? So if I were to refer, say Sylvia's reading from, what do I say?
E-code.
E-code, section 300,
Yep,
and
dash 59.
section 300. Okay, sorry to drag that on. It's just confusing. Thank you.
I know, it's sometimes. So, any discussion?
Well, since we're going through this motion, it's exercise. I'm going to go through my little spiel, just so that we're covering all bases. For those of you who were here or weren't here the last time, after the attorney presented their proposed amendment, I stated a few things. One, I agree that the current ordinance language has issues. I think there's sideline issues, there's setback issues, there's the 20,000 foot issues to try to make them work. The issue is, if you, I'll just represent this. If you have a single family, with half acre lots, you would yield about 70 units. Now, there's some discrepancy here too, because I was working with 35 acres. Sylvia told me that it's 38 acres in this parcel, plus or minus 3 acres. The math will still come out close.
So we stand for that.
I was running all my math on 35.44 acres, which is one of the numbers I saw in something they presented somewhere. So if you were going in a single family, you would max out a yield of about 70 units. And that's assuming you could get net, gross acreage cut to half acres and get all the work, which isn't gonna happen. If you max out, say. The way I read the ordinance, and I believe the intent of the ordinance for towns is you do 20,000 square foot per unit. So the max you could end up doing there would end up being about 77 units at 20,000 square feet per unit. One of the contentions that they brought up is that how do you do 20,000 feet? Tony, you mentioned it as well. If you're 20 foot wide, you're 1,000 foot deep, selling feet simple. That's an unrealistic expectation. However, you can go and develop a townhouse as a condo. It does not have to be sold fee simple. And doing it as a condo, you can do 20,000 square foot math on it. And your site is going to yield, if you're going to sell this condo product, it's going to yield 77 units or slightly more if it's 3 acres more. I think the core problem is that the corrective amendment isn't, in my view, isn't correcting the core problem. The core problem is some ambiguity in the language on setbacks and the 20,000 feet and how it's supposed to be applied. And I think what they're proposing is coming in with a curative amendment, which actually does more than cure. It actually redefines the zone. That's the struggle I have with it. Now, I'll also be totally forthright with you. I believe what they're proposing is consistent with the currently adopted comprehensive plan. I believe that the comprehensive plan calls for a higher density in that area, and that eventually the zoning may or may not catch up to it, and if it does, this would be a perfectly legitimate thing in that, at that time. I just don't believe that time is now. I think that we are tasked to enforce current zoning ordinance, which would limit it to the 70 something, 80, whatever kind of number, not 124. I think 124 is redefining the zone, not curing the issues with the current zoning. So I just wanted to articulate that again, since we're going to vote again.
And Bob and I have different views on it, just so y'all know.
So what section of the comprehensive plan did you read that out of?
It's not a particular section. That was just the intent. The comprehensive plan called for higher, more dense zoning in corridor. And it doesn't define that corridor precisely. It's just in concept. The comprehensive plan is just big picture concept.
Right, but this is the first time it's come back to the planning commission.
It is, but what you'll find in the developer world, a developer will always look at the comprehensive plan, pick and choose things that are suitable for his case, and help present that as more ammunition to support his cause. It's the way they.
It also states in there to maintain our rural.
Sure, and that's the balancing act in the rewrite of the zoning and.
But the same law, he was approved to put 94 in.
That's
I don't think.
No, that was a mistake. She said he proposed it, but he couldn't make the money off it, if I understand correctly.
So what they said is, they could only, if they did not get their variance, they could only build 96 units.
But that hadn't been approved. That hadn't been approved.
Yeah, that was one, they had 3 sets of drawings, and the one with the current setbacks based on the current, ordinances only gave them room to do 96 units, and they said that's not
So they're asking
feasible.
for 96, but they want 124, nothing's been approved.
That was at the zoning
Yeah.
hearing board.
Yeah,
That's
that's,
nothing to do with it here tonight.
And I don't know that I agree with.
right,
96
right.
I don't
Forget the
get it.
96, I guess.
They had a set of drawings.
That was
It's
never,
on his,
But that doesn't
Yeah,
make
it
it
doesn't-
legit.
that's not what they're discussing tonight, so
No.
it's,
Yeah.
can I just add, I think what Bob said, at the very end, I mean, if the comprehensive plan was finalized and the ordinances had caught up with the comprehensive plan, I think you would be in a position to do, well, you wouldn't even have to do the curative amendment, because it would be there.
Assuming the language is.
Right, so, yeah, but what the thing is, but the important thing about what he said was, I believe your job is to examine the ordinances as they exist. And that's how the planning commission is supposed to advise the supervisors. The ordinances are very clear, and I guess I just don't understand how the planning commission could do anything other
That's
than
the root problem, is that
I
I
agree.
think the ordinance is clear enough.
Well, except for the side yard stuff, yes, I would agree with that, but, I mean, your job is to advise the supervisors based on our ordinances. And, I don't know how you could vote otherwise. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but,
I disagree that the intent was to keep it the same density as a single family. I don't, for one thing, that particular piece of property was zoned PRD. It was changed whenever we got rid of our PRD ordinance.
but the ordinance, the ordinance is the
PRD,
ordinance.
let
Oh, sorry,
me finish,
sorry.
please.
Sorry.
The PRD would have allowed 3 per acre,
Would have allowed what?
3 units per acre,
Okay.
which still does not get them to their 124.
Right.
I can't say what the intent was of whoever wrote this ordinance. And I think it is ambiguous. I think there are things in there that don't add up, in my opinion. However, Debbie, what do you think?
Well, my question,
I guess that I would like to discuss is with the comprehensive plan and how it will eventually allow if the zoning is changed for higher density.
It may not allow 124 units.
Okay.
So that's something I think we can consider as well, is we don't have to allow what they allow anyway. We could make it less. But yeah, I see what you mean.
Right, right. And so if the zoning laws or rules are changed, how would that happen and when would that happen?
Well, that's what we're working on.
We're working on this.
Right. So that's what we're working on.
Yes.
The whole point of the comprehensive plan is, the comprehensive plan has no weight
Right.
whatsoever.
Right.
It's a roadmap to the future. We, as this group and the supervisors in this community, can decide, we don't like that roadmap, and we're gonna go this way or this way. And as we write these things, and as the supervisors review and approve, and they go to public hearings and public meetings, none of it may ever come to pass. Only pieces of it may come to pass. We don't know what will and won't come to pass with that comprehensive plan.
I mean, we're working on all those things now, especially the subdivision right now, we're working on that ordinance to try to clear up some of the ambiguities and some of the things that we've seen over the years.
So the 124 units currently that they,
They're currently.
right, in my notes, because I've been trying to do a lot of study on it, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, is not consistent with the current.
It doesn't, if we go by the 20,000 square feet per unit, yes, it is not consistent.
Okay, that's like one of the things that I did determine.
Now, if they wanted to put apartments in, they put 112. Per the current ordinance. Which is
The current, the way your map is 38 acres, you're
Right.
bringing up 84 units is what they could put in townhouses. And this is all based on gross acreage, which is another sticking point, like gross versus net, bring it down even more. But the max would be 84 based on your reading of the current.
For the current, if it's
Current
38.5
townhouse.
acres,
Yeah.
and as you said,
I see two different numbers, so
I
I
see
don't
what
know
your
which one
numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, but I think I did see that, or they said that, or I got that number from somewhere.
I can remember 38 as well.
Yeah. So, like I said, we've had varying different, numbers. Yes, we could do 84.
Now, where the 124 comes from,
That's what I was gonna say.
124 comes from the engineer's layout of the site. And essentially maximizing his yield, given the constraints of the slopes he has to work with, everything else. That's his maximum he can do. That's where the 124 comes from. It's not based on any ordinance, it's based on how much the engineer can draw on the paper.
And how, where's the 84?
The 84 is the current ordinance as it's written right now, if they have 38.5 acres, they would be able to get 84.
Based on 20,000 square feet per acre, ignore the inconsistencies in the ordinance, you're saying 20,000 square feet, you're 84 units.
Okay.
And that's it.
I had to do a spreadsheet.
Now, let me ask you this, so you're saying unit, I'm assuming that would be based on one building of 4 units, is that correct? But
I
I
saw
know-
it like that.
It's six, there's 6 unit buildings.
There are 6 units there, but at the last the last planning commission workshop, they were talking about 4 units.
Per
Is that right?
Gross acre.
Per acre.
Yes.
Not 4 unit.
4 units per building.
Okay, there we go. 4 units per building per acre, that's what they were talking about.
No. What they were, one of my objections to their presentation was, if you go down to the number 2,800 square foot minimum lot size per townhouse, and you do that math backwards to find out, okay, what can 35 acres yield? And I know 38 is different than 35, but my math is 35. What can 35 acres yield? The number was a staggering 551 units at 2,800. So if you just read that as 2,800 square feet per unit, you put 550 units on that property. That's where they agreed, you know what, we should put a limit so many units per acre maximum. That's why they put that.
So I have a question, why would we even need to have that 2,800 square feet? Why would we not do away with that? That scares me. Just saying.
To be honest, the minimum lot size, I don't really care what number goes there, because it's almost irrelevant.
That's what I mean,
It's
so
really
why?
gonna depend on what's your front setback, what's your backyard, and what's your width. That's gonna define a size. I don't really care what it is.
But why even have it?
So you give some people backyard of some kind.
No,
That's really what it is.
I just don't know why we would have 20, we already have setbacks.
Only in the front. Yeah, we have a rear setback, but that doesn't give you a yard, it could go over slowly.
So that's why you still want it. My only concern, and that would be, so they could read that and not read this. And that, I mean, so.
Yeah, so I couldn't find in the ordinance where it stated anywhere how many units per building on a townhome can you put.
It is 6, it does say 6.
Oh, was it? Okay,
Yeah, I'm
maybe
pretty
I
sure
missed
it
it
says
somewhere.
The ordinance is 6, their plan has between 4, 5, and 6 unit townhomes proposed. So normally we would limit that, they can't be more than 6, you can't do 8.
6 is
8
the
in the
max.
building, you could do 6, you could do 4, you could do 2.
I understand you can do different sizes, I was looking to see the max.
They over 6.
Yeah, they have everything 3 to 6. Wrong number.
So
Mostly
they-
6s, because 6 is gonna maximize the yield. That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah, so the ordinance currently states 6 per unit, per building.
I'm just surprised that we're not just jamming them all together, put 20 together and request a curative amendment for that. Right? I mean, he'd get the most units in, he's
That's
sticking,
part
you understand what I'm saying?
They could. They could come back and say, we're just gonna do a part building, we're gonna do 100. They could. I do like that they have left so much open space on there, and I understand that it's a lot to do with topography, a lot to do with the streams, you know, that are on the property, but it's still going to be open. Which I don't want to say what the intent was when the original one was written, because I have no idea. I don't think anybody does. It could have been anything. So, I mean, if I was going to propose anything, I would propose that we allow 3 units per acre, not 4. I don't like 4, I think it's too many.
But that's for a future discussion.
If I could just add, I would think of this not as acting, and ultimately you're making a recommendation, but I think the recommendation is more of what we want to see the ordinance as, not what the curative amendment wants. Because it would be better for you to say, we have flaws in our ordinance, we don't want them to take advantage of those flaws. So our recommendation is sort of today's estimate of what we think the ordinance would be, and this is your recommendation of these standards, and you could do away with some of those standards, if that's your recommendation, irregardless of really what they want.
Mm-hmm.
To better protect the township,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can say, okay, we have flaws, we're gonna make this is our correction for today until you guys finish your ordinances. Then you're giving them, I mean, you're making a recommendation, and they may not like that recommendation. If the supervisors have something to act on to protect the township, if you flat out deny it, then they can challenge you more and potentially win, as opposed to you saying, we like this route better, you're gonna be the driver, not them.
I see what you mean.
So I think that would be a better approach, sort of ignore their request and just say, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z in your way of saying, we're gonna make a recommendation on the plan, and then you're guiding yourself towards an ordinance amendment, and then in 6 months you may be at the same place, and you may be tweaking that more. I think that would be a better approach, than just saying, this is their recommendation, and saying yes or no to it. I would ignore that request and say, this is what we want to see.
I mean, I don't like the recommendations, but I think.
Well, just to elaborate a little bit more, if we went, let's say we were gonna write our own ordinance, our own curative amendment.
Yeah.
And we said we were okay with 25-foot front setback. The 25 foot is actually very consistent in the area of the other townships and everything else.
Yeah, most of them are 25, but I think 25.
25 is a very reasonable number, gives you enough space to park, it's just, that's all past sidewalk tunnel, so it takes care of that, it handles slope issues, a number of things. So if you said you did 25 for that, typical townhouse size is gonna be somewhere in the narrowest is gonna be about 20 feet wide, and they're typically about 50 foot deep. So if you say you're 50 foot deep, and then you said, okay, we need a backyard of some kind, so you have another 20 feet, or 25 feet, let's put 25 feet, math easy. You had all that up there, 100 feet, times 20. If we're actually doing that, that number, 2,800, goes down to 2,000. You could do 2,000 square foot per unit, which I'd be fine with, but you have to put a cap on it, so many units per acre. And we can do that, what that number is. And you base this on units per acre, you don't base it on, and what this does is if you said 2,000 or 2,800, I don't really care which number it is, that is the actual fee simple definition of the site.
Okay.
Each lot of an interior unit is what that would essentially define, because that's your limiting factor on this discussion. And then what limits your density overall is what you put on units per acre. And you define units per acre now as a number. And if we're gonna be clear, we should define whether it's net or gross.
Has to.
Gross.
You wanna do gross? Okay. Because gross is so easy, right? It's much tougher to subtract out the road if you plan this balance of actually anyone lose one.
Yeah, I was looking at that,
It's
how in the world would you do that?
Most of our ordinances are currently written in
I know,
and it's very difficult. I struggle with it in plantations, as you know,
I just don't see how you would be accurate with that.
much tougher. So,
Okay.
I would recommend going along with what you're saying, and then we actually do that. We craft this the way we want. Correct. And say, this is the proposal we would recommend. Right. I like that.
Because then you're in the driver's seat, and again, they may hate it and still challenge it, but you've got a recommendation that's got some teeth to it and some basis to it. And then let the chips fall where they go. Supervisors may like that, they may not like it, but at least you're defining what your ordinance should be. Because you know it has flaws in it, and there's things that need to be added to make that correct. And I think it would be better for you to say, let's push this and sort of ignore what they're coming in with and saying yes or no. They should say, our recommendation is A, B, C, or D, and this is what's going to be.
So what did the-
statute lets you do it either way? 609(1)C says, the governing body of the municipality, which is the board of supervisors, which is determined whether the challenge has merit, may accept the landowner's curative amendment with or without revision, or may adopt an alternative amendment which will cure the challenge defect. So we're not saying draft our own amendment which will cure the challenge defect, which may not be tracking or submitted.
Yeah, I don't think we need to do it anymore. I think we need to do what we want.
So I think the danger is going against the zoning hearing board. That would be my only concern. Case law. I understand, but with his curative amendment, so if he were to challenge anything as a curative amendment, from what I read in case law, is that the zoning hearing board is how all these developers lose out. If the zoning hearing board says this, they're gonna go with the zoning hearing board. I know it's slightly different, but the question was, what was the setback that they were going for the zoning hearing board? 20. Okay, so you're proposing 25.
Yeah,
Okay, and
they were not allowed, because they never had such a narrow question before that.
Yeah.
They could only consider 20.
so my concern was if they say, you make a suggestion and then, they go to court because they don't like it. And then they say, well, you've already compromised on the setback, so why can't you just continue?
Zoning hearing, they didn't compromise anything, they denied.
I'm just checking. And are you gonna put what is it with whatever your gross is that you're basing it on gross?
Well,
Units per gross acre.
I think gross is the simplest calculation.
I absolutely agree. Who wants to measure roads? And I mean, I know it can be done, but So the thing is, what does that end up with density wise?
That's
So
what
it
I'm talking about.
depends on the number that we come up with on what we would
That's-
units per acre.
That's where I'm getting. So where do you think you're gonna get density wise?
35 acres, 35 is what,
Can I go ahead?
That's gonna be 130.
Yeah, if we did 4 per acre, which I'm not, if we had, with 38.5 acres, it'd be 154 units.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I was,
that's
that's why I asked. I mean, it's actually more units than they're asking for.
with 3.5 acres, it'd be 135. I did 3.25, so I was just trying to come up to the 124, which I don't think we need to do. But it'd be 125. So at 3 acres, it'd be 150.
And you said 3 was what was consistent with the previous
So,
PRD.
Yeah, the ordinance at
PRD was 3.
Yeah.
I could definitely live with, say, 3 units per acre, 25-foot front setback, which turns into, and I'm fine with putting in a 2,000 minimum lot size. Because the lot size isn't the key, the lot size isn't the driving factor, the lot size just defines a perimeter for decent ownership, that's all it does.
Right.
Define that we have 0 sideline setbacks for interior units, and
So
whatever.
the 15-foot side setback is just for any.
15-foot sideline side gardens. I think that's a very reasonable, much more reasonable ordinance than what we're seeing.
So what does that come out? How many units? You're still up over 100 units.
Oh, no.
Yes, it'd be, if they have 3 units per acre,
It's 38 acres, 3 per acre.
it's 115. However, we're not sure of that number, so if it's only 35 acres.
I understand. I'm just running the numbers in my head with Bob saying, and I'm like, we're back to, I like his idea of 70. That's a lot more reasonable.
You throw out 38.
Now,
which is on the
but
side.
you're also using gross instead of net.
But on his applications, it was 35.44, but on page 2 of his curative request, it's 38 acres, so.
I know,
Yeah,
that's
I
what we don't know.
mean, it is whatever it is.
Let's just pretend it's 35. So we
It's
know,
35 it'd
whatever, might be 34, might be 33.
be 106 is 35.
So is this supposed to be based off of what's on the deed or what their surveys are saying?
I'm not basing anything on whatever.
No, I'm just
Acreage
curious,
they give
when
us.
they,
It's,
when they submit all this stuff, I'm
when they
just,
submit on their actual plan, they'll have to have a survey.
There'll be a boundary survey done. Now,
but what if
boundary survey-
that doesn't match their deeds, just out of curiosity?
What if it doesn't actually?
It may not match their deed because they may have right-of-way issues, they move the line back to the end of the right-of-way. So at the end of the day, if this were to go forward, they would record a plan, that plan had a boundary on it and a dedicated acreage to it. That's the only thing that we would look at is the final number of what that is. Because a lot of the older plans, again, go say the center of Route 19, you can't use that right-of-way, so they push it back. So whatever that acreage is at the end of the day is how that thing is out.
Yeah, gross should be based on the boundary survey of the existing undeveloped parcel, not after the road.
So Bob or Tom, looking at that, if you made that net, looking at this road, I'm not asking you to measure it. How many homes do you think we get if
You'll
you're
lose a
using
couple
net?
acres in roads, typically on something.
On that plan with the big loop and everything? So what are you thinking? What?
You'd lose 2+ acres in roads, essentially, one
so
road
we're-
and that.
okay, so
But
we're
the
still gonna-
problem is, from an engineering perspective.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to
it's challenging. You design the whole thing, you then draw your boundary, your polyline around the road and calculate the areas. Then you have to do the math, track the unit, the road changes.
Nowadays, it's a lot easier with AI, but yeah, you can just grab it. and do it. But yeah, still, the point was the unit count. I liked your unit count. I think that's a lot more reasonable, and we're still up over 100 units.
We are, but it's consistent, the 3 is consistent with what the PRD was. So the intent originally, if you really want to go back to intent, the intent was 3 units per acre right there. And we're putting an ordinance together which gives them 3 units per acre. So we're not.
It's not what they wanted, but it's, may not be what we wanted to do, but it's, I think it's reasonable.
It's defendable.
You have basic
Yeah, there's no basis for it, and I think that's important. So somebody, anything?
I like that, because I like the proposal, instead of
Thank you.
It said that, thank you. It
I
says-
don't like,
That was helpful.
it would be easier to say our recommendation is changes, these are the following changes to this plan for your recommendation and list those.
Yes.
What those are, and then the way I think it.
So a question I have, if we vote here tonight, a year from now, somebody else comes in with a piece of property, say 50 acres. What we're voting on tonight, would that be applied to that?
Only in the mixed use zoning district.
Okay. Unless, so not necessarily a White's County.
Well, unless you change the ordinances, yeah. As it is currently, this would only apply to the mixed use district, which is the law 19. So even if you have a property, correct me if I'm wrong, so if you have a property that's partly in mixed use and partly in R1, how does that work?
They would show the dividing line in that, and they would apply the ordinance to the section.
Okay.
They could probably request a
So,
variance too.
because in most, because I looked on our maps, and in most of, I think in all of the bigger parcels that are along Route 19, some of it's in mixed use, and the majority of it is usually in R1. So I just want to make sure that.
Where that comes into play typically is when the developable on multiple parcels.
Mhm.
And the consolidation plan of those parcels now is in multiple uses on one half of consolidated parcel becomes a well land.
But you can still figure a density based on how much it is in R1, how much it is in mixed use.
It is, it's normally a discussion with the council.
That makes sense. Okay, so
So
maybe
this would not apply to White's County or Scarlet. This 19.
just
This, oh yeah, this is.
very specific. Do we need to say that though as well? That it's not only for the mixed use.
You could state that in the recommendation.
I think that's important to clarify.
And the mixed use zone is 1,500 feet from the center.
No, mixed use is an actual zoning district. It used to have here in the overlay, that particular piece of property.
And the mixed use is 1,500 feet from the center of 19, or is it from,
Correct.
that's what I thought.
So if you amend this ordinance, you're gonna add just for mixed use?
Yes,
Well,
well, it was always for mixed use only anyway, but I just want to make that clear.
the
Or
question.
you can have another ordinance for a different part of
There are other,
The exact same table shows up in R1 and R2. And the question would we be prudent to address all of those? Actually, it shows up in village as well.
well, see, I think the only problem with that would be, I think we may want to do lower density than what we have in the mixed use area. But that's certainly a question.
You don't understand too far from curing the actual wet efficiency.
What's that?
You don't understand too far from curing the defect in the.
But the problem is it's the same defect that exists in every one of those.
Right, but if it would lead to different districts, then.
Yeah, it might be different.
Yeah, I don't know how to see, because the tables are
Exactly the same.
exactly the same. Right. No difference whatsoever.
But this particular application is only,
Yeah, I
I
wouldn't,
think it's limited to the mixed use area.
I don't know if I'd deviate at this point in time. It's a curative amendment. You're only allowed to do this once. Every 36 months.
Well, the landowner
No, the township.
That's what the township proposes the amendment. If it comes from
The state or the court, then they could change it, the way I understand it.
is, since this is their proposal, their curative amendment, even though they change it, I think we're okay as far as
Right.
changing anything else in the future. Yes.
How long would it take to amend the ordinance?
Oh, well, we still have the board of supervisors still has to look at it, the hearing still has to be done, and then there's a process after that. So it's still not going to be done overnight.
So you're not gonna propose that before the next meeting?
We will propose something, well, as long as we agree, we will make a recommendation to the board of supervisors. But that's all we do, then it's up to them to,
I mean, the hearing would be 12.
yeah, the hearing on May 12th, and that would be like 15 days. The board does to make a decision. after that. But then there's still the process of actually making the change, so it's still not going to be completely done just because the board makes the decision.
But the board could actually reject both of them and say no across the across
Making
the.
the only one.
Yeah.
We're only recommending body, that's it.
It's all there.
So they testified they only had, what, 20 to 23 buildable acres, so why do we have to use, you know, the 38 or whatever?
You do that with any development, isn't that correct? So any development that you do, you use the entire acreage. If they were doing homes, then it would have to be completely 1.5 acre lots.
But anytime you do any kind of PRD, and essentially this definition is more PRD-ish than it is,
For townhouses.
distance-based.
No,
So anytime you have any kind of PRD, it's always based on a
Even
gross
though
or
they
net
can't use
acreage.
some of it. I-
Not buildable or unbuildable, it's either gross or net, and net is defined as gross minus public right of way that's gonna be offered for dedication.
They said, yeah, because of what, the stream and the water, and because of the,
Yeah.
the sewer easement, that they only had that much.
I mean, technically, they probably could develop more of the property, it'd be more expensive than I'm sure, but they could. It'd just be a matter of building a bridge or, you know, I don't know what all would actually be involved, but
It's
the
just-
water is buildable.
And
It's just,
I don't think we should be looking at them.
We're not.
Saving money.
yeah,
And then the other thing you always bring up is they're gonna challenge us, but they didn't challenge the denial of the variance. They didn't go to common police court and challenge it. Instead, they came up with this new thing. So I'm just throwing that out.
All right, thank you. Any more discussion?
Oh, I have one more. On that Wrigley plan, do they have a section for visitor parking? Is that recommended?
it's not in our ordinance currently.
They already
Actually,
have people over at the hospital who they park on the road. That's something we can look at.
and that can be looked at when you do a subdivision plan, if the supervisors decide or somebody decides they need to do that. Unfortunately, it's not in the ordinance right now, so we can't enforce that.
You can make a
We're looking
recommendation.
at it we're looking at it for future. If you've been at our meetings where we discuss the subdivision and the zoning, right now our subdivision ordinance, we are talking about requiring that in the future.
The
But you could
concept-
make that recommendation as
The
well.
concept plan they
Today.
have in front of us does not have much.
Right.
It's very little.
But you could make
That's
that
not the
recommendation.
scope of this.
You
Yes.
could make that recommendation though, right?
But
The
that's a
supervisors,
totally separate discussion than the curative amendment. The curative amendment should not talk about parking on this project.
Okay.
It should not.
Yeah, we can do that, you know, we can look at that when we do, when they come forth with their subdivision, we can look at that. Yeah. Okay, somebody want to make a motion?
Okay, let's recap what the motion is.
So 2,000 minimum lot size. I'm gonna go in order. So 2,000 minimum lot size. 25-foot front yard setback. 15-foot side setback for end units only. And then this will only be for the mixed use. And a 3-acre minimum.
Okay,
Maximum. 3 unit maximum.
On Grove State.
Yeah, 3-unit maximum on gross acre.
So there's 4 things you said? Or 5?
I mean,
4 things you said or 5? Okay, so you have the 15-foot side units, the 3 units per acre, what was the other one I missed?
2,000 minimum lot size,
I got that, 25 foot.
25-foot front setback,
Uh-huh.
and then just that it's for the mixed use only, which it
Oh, mixed use only, okay.
is anyway, but I just want to make sure that's
So what they proposed? I see just two,
yeah, it's fine.
that's it, two little changes. Not that they're gonna like them.
They're not, but that's okay.
I just see the two things.
So we only need to name the 2 things, so we'll change. Well, no, I think we need to do, let's do the whole thing.
So if that was the motion, for a second.
No, I didn't, that wasn't a motion. Does somebody want me to say the motion and then do the whole thing again? There's somebody.
I move we accept it.
Okay, so you, the 2,000 minimum lot size, 25-foot from setback, 15-foot setback for end units only, 3-unit max per acre, based on gross acres, and that's in the mixed use area.
Just one quick question, you said about the 25-foot backyard, does that mean included in that?
No, there's a rear setback of 20 feet. Okay, fine. Is that existing?
Yes.
Yes, rear already existed 20, so that's already, okay.
Is that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead and make your recommendation, then
Sorry.
I got another question.
Did you make the motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
So we need a second.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I made a motion to accept the proposal.
Make a motion.
Need a second.
For all those things, for the 2,000.
Five acres, right? It's
Yes.
got the 2,000 minimum lot size, 25 setback. Mixed use only included.
Essentially editing what they just sent with those two changes.
So we're making our own proposal.
Understood, but essentially our proposal is
Yes.
gonna be, that is the correct design.
Okay. I don't know if I made a second motion.
All fair to aye? Aye. All opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, now I'll ask my question. In regards to the setback, the rear setbacks, you said it's 20 foot, correct? Okay, so along, the ones along 19, is that 20 feet in addition to the 50 foot they have to be off at 19? So it'd be a net total 70, then they'll be off at 19.
Wait a second, no, hold on a second. The 50, what's the 50 have to be on?
Off of Route 19.
Where's the 50 come from?
I remember seeing it somewhere off the state highway.
It's in
I actually think it's 60 from center line now, right?
Yeah, 50 foot off of,
It's 120 on the other.
What's,
They-
is that the road right away?
Yeah,
Okay, so if it's from road right away, yes, it's an additional money.
Okay,
If it's a
Road
buffer,
Right, it's road right of way, and you've got to, depending on what you have, your setback, your front yard setback, could be,
but do we also have overall perimeter setbacks?
for PRDs you do.
Not in here.
Okay.
Okay.
That's where the PRD ordinance had an additional buffer around it. You lose that when you lost your PRD.
Which I'm an advocate of when we get back to
Yes.
this and put it in a regular buffer, because in those cases, that can overlap. You can have that, say you have a 50-foot perimeter around the project, that 20 feet can come out of that perimeter. Your building just can't infringe in that buffer, in that perimeter.
that makes sense.
Understand? So it's
so
not.
if you have a 50 feet, so if you're saying if you're 50 feet from the neighboring property line because of your buffer, your 50-foot buffer, but then you have that 20-foot setback off that backyard, so that decreases that buffer off that neighboring property to 30 feet.
No, the buffer is defined as buffer to building. That's what the buffer is about. It's not buffer to property line, it's buffer to building. You can't build within that 50 feet. You can have a parcel that goes the whole way to touch the neighbor, but 50 foot of it's gonna be unbuildable. 20 foot of that is because of the setback, but 50 foot is gonna be the overriding factor because of the perimeter.
And I think in that area in particular, there's parts of 19, especially in southern part of the township, it's 120-foot right away with PennDOT. So it would be 60 feet from center. And I think that comes up to, that's almost property, I think.
Just about to the south side of Russell Road, it starts in the.
So it would actually be 60 feet there from center. And then 20 feet.
Because my understanding is parts of 19 from the township line north, it zigzags, it doesn't even go straight line, the right of ways.
You're right. Yeah, most of it is actually 60, I think.
It's 100, total 120 feet
There,
total, and it goes down to 50 foot.
but there's a lot of parts of the township where it's only 50 foot.
Really?
Yeah. And there's actually a couple properties owned to the center of the road. Great.
So since I know Tommy mentioned about, this was kind of, got you going on this, based on the PRD, the original idea behind the PRD, and the PRD originally had the 50-foot buffer. Should we, could you amend your motion to add that 50-foot buffer?
I don't think we can.
I wouldn't be in favor of that either.
Okay.
It's, you're talking about different things when you do that, because now you're trying to make this more clear. All we're trying to do right now is correct defects. Keep it simple, keep it to
Right.
the point.
But
correct?
based on a PRD idea.
Well,
Of 3
the
units per
reason-
acre, right?
The reason for the 3 per,
Gross
also
acre.
need to be a defendable position.
Sure.
And I believe that if 3 was in the PRD, there's a defendable position the township has to say, 3 is a reasonable number, that's what was there.
But what was in the ordinance is roughly 2 per acre?
Roughly, it's 2 point something. 2
Okay.
point something.
And that's not
It's
defendable?
20,000 square feet.
Okay.
It's so ill-defined.
Okay.
It's a tough position to take.
No, I understand.
Okay.
I think there's a setback off the conservation area, 125 feet.
Is there a conservation area on it?
Yeah, Scholars Run.
Whenever they're gonna have to abide by for floodplain and conservation, they just have to abide by. I don't know on that particular site there.
I believe
It's
it's,
Butler County Conservation will look at it.
I was gonna say, but I think the conservation, was one of the weird things we found out, is it's on the west side of Scholars Run, it's not on the east side.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Should split it.
And how they ever come up with that? I guess the
Somebody-
water doesn't come down this
Yeah,
side.
somebody probably should have been.
I really think some of it, had to do with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. At one time, you could sign up and sit ground aside and could not farm it.
Yeah, okay, they couldn't park over.
Yeah, clean and green.
I think a lot of that ground on the west side of Scholars Run is farm ground. I truly believe that a lot of them signed up for that.
And it's low taxes.
Yeah.
Actually,
No
that
taxes.
was,
To
they had,
get the money.
No tax money. Yeah, they reduced your taxes for
they
clean
had
and green.
cattle on that section of that property, honestly,
Where you,
decades ago, and that probably would not, you say that's probably. what it was.
as, you know, I've been told that, you know, it's because of waterway and stuff. The more that I understand it, and look at it, look at our property and other property, I really think that's why. That's why the other, the east side of Scholars Run, there's no real conservation, I don't know if there's any conservation, because that was not farmable ground.
Maybe that's why. That could be why.
And I don't know, Tom, you said you've got, I guess, some conservation ground, was that farmed at one time, or cattle ran on that at one time, or?
I got different stories. One said they planted potatoes, another guy that said he did corn on top of the hill. That was certain on.
And then, I mean, I don't even know how long it's been in conservation ground, I mean, that could have went back to the early 1900s, I don't know.
I think 1943.
But that's why I really do believe that's why that ground was put in conservation. It wasn't such a good farm that you could get paid to have cattle.
So, old business, review of subdivision and zoning ordinances. Do we want to table that till the next meeting? The reason I say it's already 20 minutes, so. I mean, it's up to you guys, see if it's.
Oh, God.
I mean, maybe we just do a marathon.
What if you go
It'd be nice to put into a meeting where we don't have
Yeah.
other factors that are.
Alright, that's it.
I know we can table that.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye. Okay, I'll adjourn the meeting.